Good morning, everyone. I hope you are doing good and please stay safe during this COVID time. We are doing chapter number 5 and this is unit number 2, that is plant physiology, and the chapter is transpiration. And till now we have done what is transpiration and demonstration of transpiration we have done, in which we have seen 2 important experiments related to transpiration. Now in this video we are going to discuss more about the modes of the transpiration, the parts from which plants used to transpire, and apart from this some other phenomena which is very important in this chapter. And I will try to complete this chapter in this video so that you can learn it for your test. So let's start our topic. Now when we say about the transpiration is basically of 3 types in plants, and this is generally stomatal transpiration, cuticle transpiration, and lenticular transpiration. Now when we say about the stomatal transpiration, that means the transpiration which takes place from the stomata. The stomata, as you know, the fine pores which is present in the leaves of the plant. Basically it is present more on the lower epidermis. Basically 90 to 95% of transpiration take place by stomatal transpiration. So if a question comes that which is the main transpirational route in plants, so answer you will write as stomatal transpiration. Now the second part is cuticular transpiration. Cuticular is basically a fine pores which is present on the surface of leaves and stems. Basically on stems there are some fine pores from where the gases exchange take place, and these are known as the cuticle. Third one is the lenticular transpiration. Now what is lenticels? Lenticels are basically present in the old woody stems. So whenever, as you know, that whenever the mesophytic cells they become permanent, they form the bark of the tree. Now in these bark of the tree still some pores are there, and these pores are basically known as lenticels. So basically 3 types of respiration are there: stomatal, cuticular, and lenticular. Now when first one is the mechanism of stomatal transpiration, that how stomatal transpiration is taking place, and for this you have to learn this diagram. This diagram is very important. However, this diagram will also come in the next chapter. So this diagram please learn and try to draw it yourself also. Now as you know that in the leaves there are some small pores, and these pores are known as the stomata. So if you see the structure, stomata is given. Now when we talk about the stomatal transpiration, that means with the help of these guard cells, the opening and the closing of stomata is regulated, and when opening and closing of stomata is regulated, at that time the gases exchange take place. That is known as stomatal transpiration. So if you see a section of a leaf, you will find the following layers, and these are cuticle, upper epidermis, palisade mesophyll, spongy mesophyll, lower epidermis, and water vapor. If you see this upper part, this is the upper epidermis which is protecting the inner surface from the top, inner surface of leaf from the top, and this is the lower epidermis which is protecting the leaf from the bottom part. Now in this you will find maximum amount of stomata present in the lower surface of the epidermis. It is basically an adaptation of the leaves so that it can minimize the loss of water from the leaf surface, because if the stomata is present on the top surface, suppose if the stomata are present more on the top surface, so due to sunlight more amount of transpiration will be taking place. So that's why it's an adaptation of the plant that maximum amount of stomata should be on the lower surface. Now if you see, there is a layer at the top which is known as the cuticle. Now cuticular transpiration is there, and about 1 to 2% of cuticular transpiration take place in the leaves. Basically maximum amount of transpiration taking place from stomatas only. Now for this, if you see one more structure, if you see the figure 5.14 which is given at the end of the chapter, you will find that the root here, it is taking the water from the soil, and from the soil the water is entering into the root xylem, and from root xylem it is entering into the leaves xylem. So that means from root to the shoot, the xylem is responsible for the conduction of water and minerals. So these water and minerals, it enters into the vascular bundle which is present in the leaf region, and now from here the water will get distributed in all entire part of the leaves. So if you see the upper part, this part is basically the part of the leaf which is given as a cross section in the previous diagram. So here if you see, this is the cross section of the leaf which is given. Now water enter into this palisade mesophyll, and from palisade mesophyll, since palisade mesophyll is also having some intercellular spaces between them, so due to this intercellular spaces the water reaches into the spongy mesophyll, and from spongy mesophyll it goes into the stomata, and from stomatas, when the stomatas get open, this transpiration take place, and the oxygen, the carbon dioxide can goes in and out from this stomatal opening. So this is basically the mechanism of stomatal transpiration. If you will read this whole paragraph, you will be able to understand that how stomatal transpiration is taking place. Phenomena in simple: from the root xylem, the water and the mineral is entering into the leaf xylem, and from leaf xylem the conduction of water is taking place to the palisade cell, then to the spongy mesophyll, and then to the lower epidermis. And in the lower epidermis there is stomata, and from the stomata the water it get changes into vapor, and in the vapor form the water comes out from the surface of the leaf. And here in figure 0.8, in this diagram you will be able to see that how the movement of the water is taking place through the leaf. And whenever the water movement is taking place through the leaf, there is a cell sap, and due to this cell sap a turgor pressure is created on the cell wall, and due to this pressure some amount of the water come out of the cell wall, and it goes into the air space between the cells. If you see, there are some air spaces between the cell which is known as the substomatal space, and from here the water it get changes into vapor, and then it start diffusing, or it get diffused out from the stomatal surface. So basically you can see that these are the arrow which is showing how the gases exchange is taking place between the leaves as well as in the environment. So for this, one important thing you have to learn that in the leaves there is substomatal space. Now with this substomatal space, the air it get changes into vapor form, and then finally it comes out from the leaves. Now if all the water will get lost in the form of the vapor, then the leaves will get filled. Now how they will get the water? For this you have to read this paragraph. The cell that lose the water in a way replace it by drawing more water in from the nearest vein. That means from the nearest vein they are also taking the water from the roots, as well as the water is going outside the leaf. And for this process the leaves used to do this part in the form of equilibrium. That means the amount of water which is going outside should be the amount of water which is absorbed by the plants. So if you see that most of the water it travel along the cell wall, so they generally travel on the surface. And how it is so? It is by the process of the imbibition, and only a small amount of water, a small quantity of water, it enters into a cell by the process of osmosis. Now whenever this process is taking place, a transpiration pull is generated. What is transpiration pull? Basically a force which is generated from the top part of the plant, basically a suction force which is generated from the top part of the leaves, due to which the water and minerals it can draw up into the tree up to 50 meters. So this is basically a pull which is generated from the top of the leaves. Basically we can say a suction force which is pulling up the water and the mineral from the root. So therefore two important forces are required. One is the root pressure, that a root is exerting pressure on the water and the liquid content to go into the shoot region, while the transpiration pull it is allowing the water and the minerals to go into the highest part of the plant. That means to the shoot, to the tip of the shoot, as well as the tip of the leaves and the stems. Now as I said earlier that more amount of stomata are present in the lower surface of the leaf. In the case of dicot leaf you will find that more amount of stomata in the lower surface. How we are able to see that they are having the maximum amount of stomata? With the help of the dry cobalt chloride paper. So if you see that this diagram is there, in which a cobalt chloride paper is placed on the ventral surface of the leaf, and as a result you will find that the cobalt chloride paper which is placed at the upper part of the leaf it doesn't change, it will remain unchanged, it will become blue only. Its original color is blue, so it will remain blue only because it is placed on the upper part of the plant, upper part of the leaf. While whenever this cobalt chloride paper is placed on the lower surface of the leaf, the blue color of cobalt chloride paper, it start changing into pink color. That means the maximum amount of stomata is present on the lower surface. Since stomata is present on the lower surface, that means the moisture content, the exchange of gases, the changing of water into vapor will be greater in the lower surface of the leaf. So due to the moisture content which is found on the lower surface of the leaf, basically on the stomata, this cobalt chloride paper, it start change its color and finally it change into pink color. So with this experiment we can say that in case of dicot plants, the maximum amount of stomatas are present on the lower surface of the leaf rather than the upper surface. Now the next topic is stomatal regulation of transpiration and how this stomatal regulation of transpiration is taking place. For this you have to read this paragraph and you will see that this line is very important. The opening and the closing mechanism of stomata is regulated by the amount of water and solute present in the guard cells. That means the opening and the closing of the guard cells is basically initiated by the amount of water which is present in the substomatal part. So from this, the guard cells during the daytime, they take the water inside and the water goes into the guard cells, due to which the guard cells swell up. So whenever the guard cells swell up, when the guard cells swell up, the stomata get opens. Similarly, whenever the guard cells they lose the water, now from when they lose the water, the turgidity, now it changes into flaccidity. That means now their cell wall as well as the inner portion of the cell is not that much hard. Now they become flaccid, and since they become flaccid, the guard cell becomes small in size, and since they get small in size, the stomatas get closed. So basically opening and the closing of stomatas is taking place, or it is regulated by the amount of water present in the guard cells, and the phenomena responsible for this is diffusion only. With the help of the diffusion, the water enter into the guard cells and then also it can comes out according to the concentration. Now next is question is there, leaves in some plants wilt during midday and recover in the evening, and this question is very important and this question is asked previously in the board exams. For example, in case of balsam plant, it get wilt during the midday, and the reason for this is, now the reason is given here. The rate of transpiration during midday exceeds the rate of absorption of water by the roots. That means the amount of water changing into vapor is more than the amount of water which is absorbed by the roots. So since more amount of water is going outside in the form of water vapor by the process of transpiration from the leaves, and less amount of water is absorbed by the roots, due to which the plants they get wilt during the daytime, and in this case the cells they loses the turgidity. Now in the evening time, since there is no sunlight, so in the evening time the temperature is not that much higher. So since the temperature is not higher, the rate of transpiration is quite low and the amount of water absorbed by the roots is greater. So this is why the leaves they get wilt during the midday, but they can recover back in the evening time. Now second is the cuticular transpiration. Cuticular is basically, as I said earlier, that it is a waxy coating which is present on the epidermis of the upper surface of the leaf. Basically it is also present on the lower surface of the leaf also, but mostly present on the upper surface of the leaf. Now this cuticle, the thickness of this cuticle, it varies from one plant to another. Now what is the main role of this cuticle? The main of the cuticle is to prevent evaporation of the water from the leaves. That means to prevent the transpiration from the surface of the leaf. Greater is the thickness of the cuticle, the less is the evaporation. So if the cuticle is more thick, then that means the rate of transpiration will be much less. Now the third one is the lenticular transpiration. Lenticels, as I said, that in the bark of the tree you will find some pores, and these pores are known as the lenticels. Now these pores they allow the diffusion of the gases, that means the exchange of gases, exchange of O2 and CO2, and these lenticels, they never close. Now they remain open all the time, whether it is daytime, whether it is night time, it doesn't matter. These lenticels, they will never close. And since they never close, the amount of water lost in the form of the vapor will be continuous. However, very less amount of transpiration take place from the lenticels part. Now next is some factors which affect the rate of transpiration. First, we are talking about the external factors. In external factors, the first one is the intensity of the sunlight. Now you know that during the daytime, the stomatas, they open so that they can take more amount of carbon dioxide inside for the process of photosynthesis. So therefore, more transpiration occur during the daytime. Since the intensity of the light is greater during the daytime, so more transpiration is taking place during the daytime. Now temperature is very important. If the temperature is greater outside, that means more amount of water will be changing into vapor, and that's why the transpiration rate will be higher if the temperature goes increasing. So second one is the temperature. Third is velocity of the wind. Now temperature increases with the velocity of the wind. So if the condition is the windy, that means in the windy condition, the change of water into vapor will be higher and more amount of transpiration will be there, because the water will get changed into vapor, and from the top surface it will get along with the wind. So जैसे ही पानी की लेयर जब भाप बन के स्लीव के सरफेस पे आएगी तो हवा के साथ क्या हो गया, बह जाएगा. फिर वैसे ही उसके बाद वाली लेयर बनेगी, वो भी हवा के साथ बह जाएगा. इन दिस वे द वेलोसिटी ऑफ द विंड इज ग्रेटर. एंड सिंपल एग्जांपल, इफ यू से दैट in a windy day our clothes, they get dry faster in comparison to the condition of hot and humidity. Now next is humidity. Humidity is basic. Humidity is transpiration is reduced if the outside condition is humid, because the moisture content is already present in the environment. Since the moisture content is already present in the environment, so the diffusion of the gases will be less, and since the diffusion of gases will be less, the rate of transpiration will be decreasing if the condition is humid. Next is carbon dioxide content. Now increase in layer of carbon dioxide content can decrease the rate of transpiration. So if the concentration of carbon dioxide goes more than 0.03%, in the environment the concentration of carbon dioxide is 0.03%. Now if it gets above than 0.03%, at this point the stomatal, stomatas, they remain closed, and since the stomatas remain closed, the rate of transpiration decreases. Next is atmospheric pressure. Rate of transpiration increase with decrease in atmospheric pressure. So if atmospheric pressure decreases, it will cause increase in transpiration rate. Vice versa, if there is increase in atmospheric pressure, there will be decrease in the transpiration rate. So these are basically the external factors which can affect the rate of transpiration. Now talking about the internal factors. Internal factors, that means the amount of water, the content of the water which is present in the leaf, the water holding capacity of the leaf, that how much amount of water it can hold in the guard cells. So if the concentration of the water decreases, now if the concentration of the water decreases, that means the stomatas will not open, the guard cells will not get turgid, and since that guard cells not get turgid, the transpiration will goes on decreasing because there is a closure of the stomata. If the concentration of water is optimum, that means it is in a sufficient amount, the opening and the closing of guard cells will take place, due to which the transpiration will be normal in nature. Now there are some adaptations to reduce transpiration, that how the transpiration can be reduced. The first one is the sunken stomata. That means the stomatas are not too much turgid. If the stomatas are not too much turgid, that means the transpiration rate will goes down, because the stomatas will not open properly, and due to this since the stomata are not opening properly, the exchange of gases is not taking place, and since exchange of gases is not taking place, so the rate of the transpiration will goes decreasing. Next is fewer stomatas. Of course, if the stomatas are fewer in number, that means the rate of transpiration will be lower. If the concentration of stomatas are greater, that means more amount of transpiration will take place. Third one is narrower leaves. If the leaf is narrow, that means the surface area is less. Now, if surface area is less, so there will be reduce in transpiration. Example is nerium. Next, reduced exposed surface. Now, how can a plant reduce its surface area? They can reduce their surface area by rolling the leaf, folding the leaf, so that it can reduce the exposure of that portion to the sunlight. So, in this way, the rate of the transpiration will goes down. Next, loss of leaves. So, if there is no leaves or there is less content or less amount of leaves in the plant, that means there will be less amount of transpiration, and in some cases the leaves they get changed into thorn like structures or spine like structure. For example, it is found in cactus plant. Now next, thick cuticle. So as I said earlier, that greater is the layer of the cuticle, that means the thickness is greater, the less will be the transpiration. So these are basically the adaptation by the plant so that they can reduce the loss of water in the form of vapor. That means they can reduce the amount of transpiration. Now one of the important question which is asked in the exam is the significance of transpiration. क्या जरूरत है ट्रांसपिरेशन की प्लांट्स में? So significance ये है for cooling effect, for creating suction force and distributing water. Cooling effect, since the water is getting lost in the form of vapor from the plants, that means the water is get released by the process of transpiration by the plants. So the temperature of the plant will goes down or it will goes normal. Just like in our body, if the temperature goes higher, so we used to start sweating, and sweating it control our body temperature. So in the same way, the plant it shows the cooling effect as soon as they start transpiration. Next, suction force. Now a suction force is very important to take the water and minerals up to the shoot part. That means to take the water from root part to the shoot part, there is a force which is required, and the force it basically act in two method. One is the suction force or basically the transpiration pull which is from the top of the leaf, and the second one is the root pressure which is generated by the roots. Now this transpiration help in producing ascent of sap by producing a suction force, and this ascent of sap is very important for letting water and minerals enter into the root hairs. Now evaporation from the leaf concentrate cell sap and increase the osmotic pressure. So greater is the osmotic pressure, greater will be the transpiration. Now due to this the concentration of the water goes higher because the water is getting absorbed by the adjacent root hair cells. So it causes a suction force, and due to this suction force the water it goes into the root region, and from root region it goes to the tip of the plant. Now if there is a suction force, so only not water is going into the tip of the plant. Apart from this, the water and minerals they are conducted from one part to the another. So due to this a transpiration pull is generated, and due to this transpiration to the water and the minerals they goes up higher in the plant, and they can be distributed or they can be translocated to each and every part of the plant. So distribution of water and minerals also take place with the help of the suction force, and for this a modified structure is there which is taking water and minerals, and these are the xylem vessels. So basically the distribution of the water and mineral take place from the xylem, but how this distribution is taking place? Because of the transpiration pull which is generated from the tip of the plant. The next is transpiration affect climate. It is very simple, as just like the evaporation it affects the climate, the changing of water in the vapor, and the vapor when they get condensed they form the rain, they form the cooling environment. So in the similar way, thus transpiration increases the moisture in the atmosphere, and due to this it brings the rain. Now two important topic is there which is generally asked in the exam. One is guttation, one is the bleeding. Now what is bleeding? Bleeding is basically just like a cut in the part of the plant. For example, when we get cut in any part of our body, our blood comes out. Similarly, when the plant is get cut from any portion, the sap of the plant it comes out, and that is known as the bleeding. So bleeding is basically exudation of sap. Exudation means oozing out. So it is basically the exudation of the fluid given out is known as exudate. So bleeding is basically the exudation or oozing out of the content of the cell or the cell sap from the plant if there is any cut in the plant. Now next topic is guttation. Guttation is basically in the night time you will find that in some plants in the leaves you will find at the margin the water it get changed in the form of the water droplet, and these water droplets are generally found on the surface of the leaf. Now the surface of the leaf it is having a pore bearing structure, and this pore bearing structure is known as hydrothodes. So whenever we talk about the guttation, you have to write this hydrothode, because these hydrothodes are the pore bearing section which is present at the margin of the leaf. So during the night time or during the early morning the transpiration take place, but in this case the transpiration is known as guttation, in which the water it comes out in the form of tiny droplets. It is not changing into vapor, it is changing into a tiny droplets, and which is present on the margin of the leaf. And the another reason for this is that if a condition is the humid, now if the condition is humid, at that time the water it also again remain in the form of droplet form, because there is continuous absorption of water from the roots. Now the absorption of the water from the root is greater than the water which comes out from the surface of the leaf. So these are basically the reason for the guttation, and you have to learn the definition of guttation and bleeding. So bleeding, as I told earlier, that it is the injury which can be in any part of the plant, due to which the cell sap or the plant fluid it comes out from the surface. Now last is the summing up. That means here if you see the diagram, in this all the process is given, that how the water and the minerals they enter to the roots as well as they go to the leaf part of the plant, and how the mechanism of transpiration is taking place. So you need not to learn the whole structure, but some of the structure you have to learn. For example, this part you have to learn from where the transpiration and guttation is taking place. Apart from this, you have to learn the root pressure, and you have to learn two important process, and these are imbibition and osmosis. So these are basically the terms you have to learn. You must know the definition of these terms and how this process is regulated in the plant. So student, I hope that you are able to understand today's topic. If you have find any problem, you can ask your query in the WhatsApp, or you can contact me directly. So we have done 3 chapters, and these 3 chapters are going to come in your test. So please prepare your test, read the lesson thoroughly, and if you have doubt, you can ask me. Till then, take care and have a great day. Thank you.